brother. We are all set. So, welcome, Derek. I've been trying to put this together for a while. So, everyone, if you're not familiar, Derek is the founder of rapidsales.io. I've asked Derek to be the first guest on the show. Him and I have a previous relationship together, and we've maintained that. And so, I think this is a really great way to kick the show off. Given that I think we're going to have a valuable conversation for everyone. But Derek, introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are, and then let's have some fun.
Yeah, for sure. Before we do that, I think it's important that we relay to whoever's listening to this that video follow-ups still work. We are laughing about that off camera. So Nick has been trying to get me back like on the show for a good month or so now. Like just
Yeah,
continually
definitely a few
text message
weeks.
me. I've been ghosting him. I haven't been replying. Completely intentional. And then he sent me a video, a selfie video as a follow-up message. Like, come on, man, let's do it. I was like, okay, let's book it. And then, 48 hours later, here we are. So I
Yep.
appreciate your persistence.
100%. Well, Derek is worth having on the show, so I wasn't going to quit. But yeah, introduce yourself. Let everyone know what you're doing.
Yeah, man. So I'm Derek Stupsky. As Nick said, I run rapidsales.io, which started off as basically a side hustle consulting business where I'd go into some businesses and help them with their sales processes and all of that. And it's completely evolved over the last 18 months where now we do fractional sales management. So we have just about 10 clients under management now. It should be over 10 by year's end, the way that we're moving. And what fractional sales management is basically everything that you can imagine you'd get out of a sales manager, just without having to have a 40-hour a week commitment to it and without the payroll commitment on the company side. So there are plenty of businesses out there that are probably in the range of 30, 40, 50 grand a month on the low end, all the way up to 100 to maybe even $250,000 a month in revenue that need structure. They need sales management, but they also don't need someone in there 40 hours a week. It's not robust enough for them to fully commit to a full-time manager just yet. So we help bridge that gap to get ownership out of the sales department so they can actually work on growing their business. And we can alleviate that stress and get them off the sales floor. And we build and manage the entire sales team for them.
That's great. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, just because this is something that you're really leaning into, I don't know if you believe that there's a time that's necessary. I think every business model is different. So I don't think this is there's no one answer, but let's say under 10 million in net new ARR, small to medium sized business, maybe 5 sales reps, that sort of thing. I've also often believed that having a sales manager at that stage is almost a complete waste of money. At that point, you've had the founder or the owners recently removed from sales. They're working on operations and marketing and now content being a big piece of business. And they're trying to find managers that, the salaries now are insane,
Yeah,
6-figure plus fully loaded. You're looking at maybe 200K for someone that's actually
at
good,
least, at least.
at least. And so, and there's a lot of high turnover there as well, because, we can get into that. But do you feel like that sales teams always need a manager, or do you think that fractional management is maybe the future, not for Coca-Cola, but like for a small to medium sized business that's maybe around that 10 million in net new ARR mark?
Okay, so I think that there's a lot to be said about that question. So the blanket statement, does every team need a manager? The answer is no. There are some that are just not quite there yet to be managed. So if you are running a business and you just hired your first sales rep, do you need a sales manager? No. You should be doing all of that, right? That's still going to be your responsibility. But you start building up and you start removing yourself from the business or from the sales side of the business, and you want to start focusing on, like you said, the content, operations, fulfillment, driving the company forward. Then at that point, maybe it's worth entertaining, provided that revenue is steady and the salespeople that you have in place are performing at a decent level. They don't need to be rock stars, but there's some autonomy already established in the sales department. And you need someone to come in and solely focus on it to drive it forward and grow it and expand it. I
Mhm.
think then it's worth at least a conversation to explore what that would look like.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what are some of the common themes that you're seeing in terms of not the biggest issues you're seeing? What are some of the most consistent issues that you're seeing right now in sales teams? And um, with everything that's been changing over the past 5 years, I think that there's a lot that has gone into sales that
Yeah.
isn't effective anymore, that was effective for a long time. So Curious your thoughts on that.
Okay, so one is laziness is a pretty common denominator across the board. Why are teams not performing? And they sit back and they just want to receive these super hot leads on their calendar. And if they don't close, if they don't show up, who cares? And if they don't close, who cares? I'm going to take on more, and I'm just going to make money on those that show up that are waving their credit card in my face.
Mm.
So I think the art of sales, unfortunately, at scale has lost its way. Don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of really good salespeople out there that get it. But a lot of the times I come into these companies like we're not performing, and then all of a sudden we just track their actions, the sales department actions, and they're not doing anything. So you wonder
Mm.
why they're not performing. So that's one thing that's really a head scratcher, is that I think the gurus of the space have done it a disservice by presenting high ticket sales as this sit on the beach, drink Mai Tais, and make 20 to 40 grand a month, with your feet in the sand. And it's anything but that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The big problem is the description in the job that sets the expectation that you are a closer. Okay. Like, for example, if you're in pharmaceutical sales, you're never going to see a job description that says closer. Okay. It's going to be a sales representative because there is a host of factors that are
Yes.
required for you to fulfill that job, whether it's nurturing, relationship building, the follow up. Obviously, we joked about earlier. I sent Derek a video message to get him on the podcast, and I did. People are busy. And if you're focused on just, and it's not that people don't want to do things, right? Not that they don't want your product or they don't want to go on your show, but if you don't have a way to communicate consistently and follow the entire cycle of what sales really requires, your business will suffer and then you will suffer. Like if you have a family, like your own paycheck. So I think that it's a mistake to have this closer role be glorified as like all you need to do is close deals.
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't,
anything.
I don't think it's sustainable. That's just the reality of it.
No, and listen, will we get lucky? Will we get hot prospects that jump on? They're like, I'm ready to buy right now. Of course, it's going to happen, right? It's inevitable. But to solely rely on it is absolutely crazy. I want to hit on something that you just mentioned, is like people are busy, right? And it's not that they don't want to work with you or buy your product or buy your service, but this quote has stuck to me. I forgot who said it. I wish I could quote them directly, but they said the moment that you forget about the prospect is the moment the prospect forgets about you.
Mm.
So like when you stop following up and you stop reaching out and you stop being present with the prospect, they are so busy with whatever's going on with their job, with their family, with their life, that it's not important anymore to pursue whatever product or service you're trying to enroll them in. So it's just something that I really preach heavy, is like the moment that you forget about the prospect is the moment the prospect forgets about you. So we have to stay on top of it.
Definitely. So I put out a piece of hate mail yesterday on LinkedIn that said that, if you're outbounding continuously, you're dead in the water. If you watch the whole video and you see what I actually say in the description, that's not the point of it actually. The point of it has to do with spamming people in replace of actually following up using hyper personalization. That's not actually hyper personalized. It's just like a manipulative way to get people to respond. When you use that quote, it hits home because it's reality. The second you forget, I want to make sure I have this right. You said the second you forget about the prospect forgets about you.
Yes.
Okay. I think that that's gold. But what happens, right? When we say, okay, well, the easiest way for us to get them to not forget about us is to just spam their inbox with emails. There becomes a point where reminders are a nuisance and you will lose that subscriber or you'll lose that person from maybe using the wrong tactics to actually nurture them. And so
Yeah.
what the post actually said was lead scoring and lead nurturing is a waste of time. And it's a waste of time the way that most people are doing it, which is
Agreed.
overloading and overstimulating the prospects with unrelevant information, thinking you're staying in front of them.
And that's the crazy part, is that like it's either on the far side of the spectrum or the complete opposite end of the spectrum. There's either nothing that's happening or it's completely overwhelming, and there's got
Yeah.
to be this happy medium that goes on, right? So it blows my mind when there's no follow up, and then when we say follow up, it's like you're choking them, like you got to let them breathe a little bit, right? So to me, it's like, okay, what do I know about that person? If I was lucky enough to maybe had a conversation with that person, whether it was a 15-minute discovery call, or whether I had to spend an hour and a half with them on a Zoom call or in person or whatever it might be, what do I know about that person? And I think you talk about like the hyper personalization side of things. It's not the content and the messages, yes, I think are important to be personalized to them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's understanding how that prospect operates. What do they need to feel supported? How do they go about making decisions? And I think all of that goes into how do you handle the follow up? So as much as we want to leverage automation and just say, I'm going to put them in the follow up pipeline and we're going to let all the drip sequences do their thing. It has its part. But if we really want to be good at what we do, it's understanding what gets that person excited, what makes them tick, how do they operate, what type of personality are they?
Mm-hmm.
And then we know how we can go about handling that conversation. A great example was one of the companies that I was working or I'm working with now. Their closer was sick, out of office for whatever reason, like last minute deal, and he had prospects on his calendar. So I jumped on and took one of his prospects, and this was a discovery call to basically like a webinar to then follow up after the webinar is kind of the sales cycle that we're running there. And the guy ended up paying in full afterwards. And to me, it was, I want to understand what gets him excited. And so I have conversations where he loved the Yankees. Like he was a New York Yankees fan through and through. And at the time, the playoffs for baseball were just getting started. So it was like when I was checking in with him, it wasn't, what'd you think of the webinar? Are you ready to buy? I was like, did you see the game last night? Right. And we start talking about the game. And all of a sudden it's like, cool. Hey, man, oh, by the way, we meet up tomorrow at 3. Are you still good for that? Oh, yeah, yeah. I can't wait to talk to you. And so to me, it's like, what can I do to make the exchange and the communication enjoyable for them so that I'm not a pain in their ass? Because we don't want to be we don't want the solution to be more painful than what they're actually trying to fix.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I look at like the follow up with prospects and things along those lines.
I like that a lot. I think that it's clear and you're humanizing it. You're not just trying to find some, templated process and then just using their name right in the headline, which by the way, there's been mass studies for anyone listening where when it comes to at least email marketing, most specifically, that just simply changing the first name in the headline has the largest impact on getting people to open the email, not like this claiming in the copy that the email was written custom to them. It's the same thing with handwritten cards. People at this point just kind of know that it's not real, so it's lost its effectiveness. So that customization in the headline of the email is the most prominent piece that's actually getting them to open it up. So just a tip for everyone. But you're humanizing it by talking about the game, right? Talking about some of the personal interests. And I think that there's a few types of people out there where some people don't want to have that conversation. But my belief in experience, and this is anecdotal, I would say 99% of people, right? Like they don't just think and
Right.
breathe about business every single day. And I have friends that are like that. I have friends that they don't want to talk about anything other than business. And it's so rare. Most business owners, if they can get 5 minutes with you to escape reality because they don't even want to be on the call with you in the first place, it's like it's just another thing for work that needs to be done. It's a breath of fresh air for them to say, man, I can't believe the Phillies lost to the Mets last night, which which they did, right, in real life. And you smile and you laugh and you have a lot of fun, talking about it. And then it's, hey, by the way, I only have 35 minutes with you. I want to dig in. I know that you'd mentioned on the last call that you were a huge Phillies fan. So, sorry for your loss, right? Laugh again, get into it. It's okay to do that kind of thing because what it shows is that you were not just going through an agenda. You were paying attention to who they are as a person. And when people feel heard based on who they are, they're going to gravitate to what it is that you're trying to accomplish for them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, I think there's that humanized element of it as well. I think most people live in these lives where they're not heard, they're
Mm-hmm.
not understood, even at home, right? Some people dread going home at the end of the day. Like they don't want to go home
Yeah.
because they don't feel heard or respected or whatever it might be. And so the moment that we can give them just a little taste of that, of like, hey, I care, I'm listening to what you say, I'm paying attention. It's amazing, especially like again, in the world of automation. It's very easy to blast people and spam them. So just listening and caring, and the text messages of, hey, I saw this and made me think of you, sort of deal. I think those go a long way.
They definitely do. So I want to stay on this for just a second because I think it's a big pain point for mainly agencies and B2B SaaS companies. Agencies have really adopted the SaaS model because it's a recurring revenue model. Not every
Right.
model is a recurring revenue model. So if you have a recurring revenue model, this is something to really think about. There's a guy named David Spitz. I did not know about David Spitz until I started reading the book Revenue Architecture. And I came across some of the data that he was talking about in the first few chapters. And basically in 2015, okay, this is everyone really needs to think about this. In 2015, it took 100 cold emails. Now, this is not to a warm audience. This is not to someone that's attended your event before, somebody that's been following your ads. I'm talking like actually a cold email. All of these terms, by the way, like what's cold, what's warm, what's an MQL, what's not an MQL, has become relevant, like relative to each company at this point. So you have to understand how each company is defining what. I am talking coldest in the sense of an actual, you got an email address from somewhere and you're sending a cold email for the first time. It only took 100 cold emails to generate a qualified opportunity in 2015. Now, if you fast forward to 2023, it's over 1,000 touches over the various platforms. So this is phone, email, text, social interactions. It could be, on social media or at an event, but 1,000 outreaches from various angles to generate that same qualified opportunity. Now, let's go back to 2015 where your SDR and your BDR team, you could have a SDR fully loaded for maybe 60 grand. That's with bonuses. Now they're creeping up to the six figures, and most of the products cost the same thing, around the same as what it costs to hire an agency then is close to what it costs to hire an agency now. And what you're looking at is business models that are now designed off of outdated practices. And in the beginning, you can see revenue kind of ramping and ramping and ramping, but it's not sustainable for the business. And so this is something that I'm seeing that's an issue. And so I'm curious, with the companies you're working with, are they heavy on BDRs and SDRs? Are they heavy on, that constant follow-up, that more outreach is going to equate to, more business all of the time? But what are you currently seeing? Because when I looked at that, it challenged a belief that I had that was in the opposite direction. Was the more reps that you get out there in the world, the more that's going to come back. And that belief for me personally has been shattered. I don't think that that's glued to every industry. And by the way, if you're a B2C business, this doesn't apply at all. I'm talking B2B, right? And so what have you seen? And like, does that hold up with any of the clients that you've been dealing with?
Okay, so I want to piggyback on something really quick, and then I'll get to the
Yeah.
answer. Uh, I was doing some research on just content and the importance of the role that content plays in the sales nowadays, right? Everyone is so content focused. And I read somewhere that it would take anywhere between 5 to 7 hours of content consumption for someone to then go, you know what? I think I might work with Nick now. To
I
be
don't
able to
believe
build.
it.
What's that?
I don't believe it.
What do you mean you don't believe it?
I don't believe that metric, right? So it sounds like I would have to see the data. Like I have become more focused on data than anything else. So do you remember the rule of seven, where people say like they have to see your ad up to 7 times before they consider to be a client?
Right. Yep.
That started in the 18, or I think it was 1983 or something like that, or 1883. Don't quote me. It started a long time ago, where a guy that was a salesman essentially made this up out of thin air to sell more placements in a magazine. And then
Smart.
another salesman about a decade later said, well, actually, I'm sorry, he started it with 6 things. It was 6 times. Another salesman found out about this approach and said, oh, actually, it takes 7. And this was in the 1900s. This one for sure was in the early 1900s, but the original guy was way before that, at least a decade or two. And so that was a completely fabricated metric that is still being taught online by some high ticket gurus that are like, oh, people need to see your ad 7 times. That was literally pulled out of thin air from somebody like where TVs didn't even exist yet. Right. And we're using that as if it's a
So let me
fact.
ask you, from a content side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can have plenty of content that's out there,
Yeah.
short, long form, etc. What do you think it takes for someone who's on the fence or comes across your content to go, okay, yeah, like Nick knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Is it
So
is it is it
it
one
would
reel? Is it
depend.
one long form? What do you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that it would depend on a few things. This boils down to the marketing approach versus like what the sales approach is. If somebody's in market, I think one or two videos, they should be ready to say, hey, what do I need to do to work with the business? The problem is that at any given time, this is general data as well, not industry specific. 95% of all markets are not in the mode to buy. They're actually out of market.
Right.
And so you only have 5%. So this basically means that marketing is about creating memories. So if I were to say, like a good neighbor,
Yeah, State Farm is there,
yeah.
right?
So you
Yeah,
remember that. Now, what
sure.
happens is too many people that run retargeting ads and content creation are always saying something new, trying to provide value, sounding inquisitive, but they're not consistently on brand to create a memory. And so the big thing here, I have this written in front of me, is marketing is about changing memories, and memories are what makes money. And this is completely counterintuitive to the standard ads approach and content approach that you're seeing right now, where people are optimizing for views and likes and not to identify with their audience that needs to remember them. And so,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
I like that. I like that. Which is why jingles are so. You said the State
yeah,
Farm. Like,
jingles, sonic branding, being if you're consistent with your messaging, your audience will remember it. And so I think that if you're talking to the 95%, it's going to take way more touches than I think what I don't know where that metric came from because I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but I think that it's just it depends on where how you're looking at it. So
sure.
if you're in that 95% audience, right, that's not ready to buy or they just don't need what you're doing right now, well, they're in the memory stage, which means you need to be consistent with your messaging to get them to remember you the way that you remember the State Farm jingle. And so that's going to take way more hours of content than what you said. Now, if someone's in market, I think it will take less.
Oh, without a doubt, right? And
Yeah,
obviously, there's going to be stages of warmness or readiness to buy.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so
I
yeah.
didn't mean to intrude that because I'm
No,
sure you
you're
have
good. No,
something
that's
to roll
good.
in, but I mean on the cuff, it's like it's fun stuff to talk about.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the history of the 6, 7 times seeing your ad or whatever it might be to make a decision is interesting in itself.
Yeah. Yep. It was like basically just made up to make people buy more space in a magazine ad.
People will say anything to sell something.
They will. And so this comes down to something called reasoning by analogy, right? And so reasoning by analogy from a marketing perspective means that we look at the historical successes in marketing or anything and say, well, this is what's historically worked, and so we need to adopt this thing. And so to some degree, adoption could be the fastest form of success, right? We know that, hey, if this McDonald's model works, that's how Burger King was born. There's absolutely no question that adoption can bring speed to money. But the issue is that when you rely just on outdated, or I don't want to say outdated, when you rely solely on the reasoning by analogy approach, you miss what the new trends are going to be. You miss what the reality is. The best example would be from another book. I actually can't even remember the title, but they start talking about in the very beginning how doctors back in the day used to bleed people to cure disease. Like if they had strep throat, they would strategically bleed people and they would bleed people sometimes to death and say, well, we couldn't save this person. And we know today that you cure strep throat with antibiotics, but that's what they would do. They would literally bleed people thinking that they were getting whatever was wrong in their body out. So they would bleed a liter or they bleed 3 liters, or over the course of a week, they bleed like, 15 liters. And I'm not an expert, a medical expert. So if I'm like way over the lethal amount, forgive me, but I'm just giving you examples. And there's cases where they would kill people by bleeding to death to try to solve something as simple as strep throat. And now we know that antibiotics would solve that problem, but they didn't know back then. And so, as extreme or as silly as an example as that is, we could be bleeding our customers by just doing what everyone else has done in the past when there could be new ways to solve the problem.
It's a good analogy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes sense. It makes
Yep.
sense. Okay, so let's not skip past the original question.
I don't even remember, honestly.
I took this to, it had something to do with BDRs.
Oh, that is what it was. Yeah. Do you see
Yeah.
that people are still hiring or over? I think there's an over hiring problem. So I wanted to figure out like the people you're working with, do you see that people are over hiring BDRs and SDRs, or your clients hiring like the right amount? What do you think the right amount is? Because I think it's a necessary role. I just want to
Yeah.
figure out from your perspective, what are you seeing right now with that?
Okay. So I will tell you that when I have control of hiring and bringing people in to build out the sales departments, we try to stay as lean as we possibly can.
Mm.
And if I cannot give our SDRs, so in our appointment setters and our closers, ample opportunity to capitalize, to make a lot of money for themselves, then I'm not going to grow the team at that point. Right. So I don't control all of the marketing. I have some input and some say on what things, different angles we could take or whatever it might be, but
Yeah.
I'm not the one throwing money into the ads, right? That's the business owner and whatever agency they're working with or whatever it might be. So to me, it's like I try to operate as lean as I possibly can with these sales teams because I don't want to tell someone, hey, you have the opportunity to make six figures as a closer with us. You'll make 10, 12% commission, and here's the package, whatever. And all of a sudden they're taking 2 calls a day.
Mm.
I don't care how good you are, you're not going to cross, 8 to 10 grand a month, taking just 2 calls a day, selling a $6,000 product.
Right.
So I need to make sure that I'm holding up to my promise on the front end. And if they're stuffed and we know that there's still room to grow, then we'll bring on someone else and scale them up and continue to grow it that way, as opposed to going and trying to hire 5 or 6 people and say we have a full sales team and nobody's eating. So to answer your question, the scalability of that, I really try to keep it as lean as possible, number one. And number two, I always look at it as a ratio. If I have one like really solid setter and we have really good lead flow coming in, it's usually like one setter to 2 closers, maybe 3 closers is kind of the ratio that I've seen that keeps a really fair balance where the setter has a lot of opportunity to make some good money and the closers calendars are full when we talk about inbound and outbound opportunities.
I think that that's the perfect ratio. I would agree with that. And I think your approach is in line with some of the metrics that I was just kind of spewing out earlier. The big problem that I see is that people are over hiring, assuming that more means more. And they're not taking into account the entire like go to market efficiency of their business. They're concerned about how many deals are we bringing in? What's the CAC to LTV? Like all stuff
Yep.
that's fine to look at. But are you calculating the total cost of sales and marketing? If you have all these BDRs and they're producing only 10% more than if, let's say, you have 5 BDRs and the production increase is only 10% than when you had one, doesn't matter if it's skill. It doesn't matter if it's because your TAM has been capped and you've had the audience for a while. It doesn't matter what the reason is. And then you have too many closers, assuming that for every one BDR, all 3 closers would have full books. Well, you're going to have an extremely bloated sales and marketing department, and you're not going to have a lot of profitability behind. Your CAC is going to get pushed way back,
Yeah.
right?
One of
Because
the, one of the
people are
clients,
becoming more expensive.
I was gonna say one of the clients that I had was last year going into this year, and that was exactly what happened.
Mm.
I mean, it blew up. We were operating like 2 or 3 closers. We were doing 100, 150K a month. We were cruising like, oh, we can double this. And they went out, and I was not part of the recruiting on this side, right?
Yeah.
And they went out and they brought in 2 or 3 more closers, and they brought in like 5 or 6 setters, and all of a sudden this team went from 3 to 9, 10 in a matter of 2 weeks, and overall cash plummeted. Like we got
It's just,
got
I just
done.
haven't found anyone that has been able to circumvent that date. And I used to think the same thing. A few years back, I was like, the more people we have doing outbound, the more people we have following up, we can book more appointments. Like once you have it systematized, it's just not the case anymore. I think that your approach of running lean for anyone listening is the best way to go. Once you're close to capacity, hire another BDR, hire another salesperson. Like have a point where when you hit a certain capacity, that's when you start to open that team up. But just hiring to double the revenue by like doubling the size of the sales team, it sounds like it would work. And so I'm not dissing it. Like I used to feel the same way. It just doesn't work that way. It's not the
Yeah.
way it
I had a,
works.
I had a conversation with someone the other day. They brought me in to help them get to their first 100K months. They're like 40 to 60 kind of fluctuating and looking to scale. And one of the conversations was, well, if we just had 4 salespeople do 25K, we'd get there. I'm like, that's good math. That would work,
It's
wouldn't
good
it?
math. Yeah.
But the problem is you have one guy right now that can't even do 30 by himself. So we got to fix this problem first. There's a sales efficiency issue because he should be feasting. He's the only guy here, and he's barely touching 30, if that. If he's getting 40, we're like, oh, we're blown away. So like until that gets solved, we can't just throw people at the problem. Like we have to make sure the efficiency of the sales process, is he even the right fit? Like, should we just go get someone else? Right. So these are all the discussions that we get into and say, can we prove it with 1 or 2 people to make it scalable, get them at capacity, and then say, okay, let's bring on another one in a proven system so that their onboarding and ramp up process is smoother.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. I think that's great. It's funny because one of the companies I worked for, okay, before Sales Tycoons was a thing, they doubled the sales team in a matter of 90 days. And all that happened was everybody that was on the team just made less money and we hit the same revenue targets. And then the solution was, oh, well, we just need to add outbound to the sales team because it was just all inbound closing, which is, again, one of those problems that we talked about earlier. So, yeah, we overhired, but that's because we didn't have a plan for outbound yet. But what they didn't realize is that we actually were doing outbound already, right? And so we knew that that wasn't going to solve it because we already had an outbound process, not through the company, but every one of these salespeople was highly motivated and we were all sharing ideas and trying to bring people in. But because it takes so much work now to get, now I'm not saying you shouldn't do outbound. I think you should, especially if you have downtime, but relying on outbound because the sheer volume that you need in order to convert somebody, not just as a qualified opportunity, but actually into a client that's going to experience recurring impact, it's not going to explode the business. And this is why you need to have a lean team and say, if you maybe have a team of 10 people and that 11th person has a full book and nothing to do all day, you might be able to eat that cost because everyone else is super busy. And we got to figure out how to increase, either the marketing or their approach or whatever the case is to get them to the next level. But we need to have a way to stay lean and to figure out when we can hire. I think this is a good topic to talk about because right now I think hiring is a big problem for people. And I think mainly it's not the people that are coming to the business. I think it's the problems that we're talking about. And it makes the salesperson look bad, right? It makes them look like they have no skills. They're just kind of set up for failure. And then it's like, oh, well, you need to outbound, like eat what you kill. And all these things that have a ton of merit, but we can't be ideas sales managers, which is what we become a lot of times, which is like, giving ideas to go out there and get work. And you have to own your book. But if we can't give solutions to those people and they're being hired, they're employees, well, it's actually on us. So we can give them the idea of the result, but that doesn't get anywhere but the idea itself. We need to be solution-based managers and provide clear, actionable, roadmaps for these guys that are struggling in a time of, low opportunity to go out there and hunt. If you actually want them to do that, we have to be the ones that provide the plan. If not, you are the one as the business owner or the sales manager that's doing everyone a disservice by acting like you have the solution just by giving them ideas. Did you try this? Did you try that? Did you try this? And it's like, that's not helping anyone.
No, it doesn't. I laugh because I go back to, I was working for a manager as a salesperson who was that to a T. We need you to be the hunter. Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? Have you done that? It's like, can I get some more like support as opposed to just ideas?
Yeah.
And then they would get frustrated when things were happening because there was nothing proven. There was nothing planned out. It was literally trying to figure it out from scratch. Like, where's the sales? That's like, you guys gave me nothing. I'm trying to build this. I'm trying to build the plane as we fly here. Right. And so, I just put a smirk on my face because I've lived that, right. Of having
I've lived it too. And I'll be honest with you, I've even been that manager at some point. There's been times it's easier to do that. There's been times where I didn't know how to solve the problem. And rather than just asking for help, I had to just say, oh, well, I see in this call, you didn't tie this person down, or you didn't build enough value, or you didn't. Yeah, that's the reason you're not selling consistently. No, that's the reason that call wasn't perfect, one call. And it'll be different if you watch another call. Like it's, if I ever, and I will plug Fathom in here, I use Fathom, but if I'm personally on a sales call and I review every single call that I do personally, it's just a healthy exercise for me. I don't think everyone needs to do that, but I do. Every single call, when I watch it, it's so easy reactively to be like, this is where you can improve. This is where you can improve. This is where you
Oh
can
yeah,
improve.
absolutely.
So you don't need a manager to do that with AI and the way that we can record. Like every salesperson can self-reflect by watching the call and say, okay, here's where I went wrong. This is the part of the process that I missed. Here's the objection that they gave me and I completely bombed, or it shouldn't have even happened in the first place because I didn't ask the right questions in the beginning. That's stuff that they can do. I think the manager should step in and still be able to identify that stuff. But what are the things consistently? What are the clear things that we can help that person on for them that's going to help them get to the next level, right? So self-assessment. When you and I were at gym launch together, we called it game tape. I still use that term. I think game
Oh
tape
yeah,
is a
it's
fun
easy.
way, right? For anyone that didn't know, Derek and I worked at gym launch together, and we had a great experience. But game tape, right? So everyone should be watching their own game tape, or everybody should be kind of self-assessing to some degree. But the manager has to be able to figure out what is the consistent issue across the team and
That's
for
it.
each individual.
That's it. That's it. Right. So you can look at it as you're talking this through. All I'm thinking is Monday morning quarterback. Right. So
Yeah,
you
exactly.
watch the games on Sunday, then you watch Sports Center on Monday, and you go, oh, that guy was wide open. Why don't you need to pass it to him? Right. And so to your point, Nick, like consistency and trends are the things that I look for. And so if we have one opportunity, if we listen to one call and that person fumbles through something, okay, like we'll make a note of it. Like, hey, this probably could have been done a little bit better, but I'm not going to beat him over the head with it.
Right.
But if I get on and listen to 3, 4, 5, 10 calls of the same person and they're doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, well, there's the trend and there's the consistencies that we are looking for that now need to be addressed because it's become not positively consistent. Like they're consistent, but so is their outcomes and not getting what we're looking for. So that's what we do a lot with those recordings. And like you said, I'm a big fan of Fathom.
I
Every
love
rep
it.
that works for me. They have Fathom. And we'll do reviews all the time on calls. I do them off call. I send notes, Loom videos, etc. Really just to make sure that we can build up consistencies in the right way and not let little one-offs feel like it was the reason why.
Yeah, it can't be, right? And I've seen too many people, and I've been a victim of it in the past, doing it to people. You review a call, you assume that's the problem, you think you did your job, but on every call, you're going to miss something a little different, and you're going to do some other things better than you did on the previous calls. That variability is that's not a performance based way to manage. That's like an efficiency metric almost. It's like how efficient were you on this call? It's like efficiency management. But you have to measure that, but you need to measure the performance, which is the overall consistent things. Everyone can learn sales. There's a process, and I have a belief. I'll be curious your thoughts here. I have a belief that everyone should deliver things in their own flavor, right? So to speak. There are steps, there's ways to go through it. You can have a framework, but if you try to say it the way I would say it, it might not feel genuine because you're just trying to be somebody maybe that you're not. And
Yep.
so as long as you're following through, you're asking the right questions, you're going through it, I think letting your personality shine is the best thing that you could possibly do, is being yourself. Right. And so I do think that there needs to be that flexibility. But if there is no consistency, if it's all over the place, you even see this with like unicorn sales reps sometimes getting off the beating path and they stop following their process, even if they designed it, and things start to go downhill. What are your thoughts behind, measuring it from a performance based point of view rather than like we were saying before, just trying to see how efficient each call is? And, how do you feel about people just leaning into being themselves and delivering it in their own words? Granted, they're not skipping steps.
Okay. Awesome. So from a performance standpoint,
Yeah, that was a little convoluted, everyone. So sorry
yeah,
about
we'll
that.
start with performance and then we'll go into the person being themselves.
Yeah.
So from a performance standpoint, with all the teams that we take over, we manage, we institute three KPIs that we focus on. And I also have tiers of the KPIs. So I have like your minimal acceptable standard. We call that like our bronze category. That's like, Nick, you're doing okay. Like, we're not going to get rid of you yet, but you better like, you better step up a little bit better, right? Like, you're safe for like the next month, but here's your warning sign.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have like our on par, like, hey, you're hitting the expectations, you're good to go. We'd love to see you do more, but you're also not hurting us. And then we also have like our setting the standard, our gold category, if you will. And inside of those categories, we have three separate KPIs that we look at. And the way that we set the KPIs up are by basically a hierarchy. And so KPI number one is total cash collected. So if you hit your cash collected goal, like, we're good. Let's keep moving forward. Let's keep doing what we got to do. We'll continue to get better, continue to do our reviews, etc. But that one metric got hit. We know that you produced what you needed to produce for that month, and we keep going.
Yeah.
The second thing that we look at is cash per appointment. So this is all the assigned calls on your calendar, regardless of outcome. No shows, unqualifieds, qualifieds, paid in fulls, installment plans, no matter what. If they ended up on your calendar, what we do is we take your total cash collected and we divide it on how many calls were assigned to you over the month. And typically would see anywhere between like $300 to like $600 cash per assigned call. So that's like the efficiency side of things. I'm getting to your answer.
No, this is great. I actually just took a note here a second ago that I have something that I want to ask you.
Okay, cool. And then the third one is the total volume of deals that were closed. So maybe cash wasn't hit, cash per appointment wasn't hit, and we closed a lot of down sells, and it was just a really high volume sales month, but the cash wasn't super high. We took a lot of like lower down payments, but we still got deals across. So that's like the third one that we will look at. So we hit number one. Number two, number three probably fell into place, or they're pretty darn close, so I'm not concerned with that. But if we didn't hit one, then we look at two, which measures the efficiency of the sale. And if that's not hit, then we look at total volume. Maybe it was just a grind amount, lower ticketed type month, but we produced a lot of deals by volume. So those are the three KPIs that we look at. Reason why I wanted to share that was managing for performance, and that's what we look at. So yes, your call may only be 20 minutes and you close a $5,000 product. Your call might have been 90 minutes and you close a $5,000 product. At the end of the day, that efficiency metric of cash per appointment lets me know that we're healthy, or if we're healthy. So I'll go to the marketing team or the CEO of the company and say, how much are you paying to book a call with the closers? And they'll say, oh, it's costing $150. The minimal acceptable standard that we're looking for is at least a 3x. So that means that we have to be producing at least $450 cash per appointment that's on the calendar. Anything above that, we know that we're cruising. So that's how we gauge our performance, as opposed to like efficiency on a call in terms of like how quick or how efficient the call was. It's how efficient are you as a salesperson. So that includes your nurture, that includes your closing ability, that includes your follow-up. And at the end of the month, are you hitting that metric of cash per appointment?
So I think that's a great way to do it. The reason is, and I'll just it stems from a marketing thing. Like right now, I see this in marketing where everybody's caught up in efficiency metrics, which is basically like your cost per lead, all that sort of things. Where
those are vanity metrics.
They're all vanity metrics. like performance metrics or effective metrics would be a lot different, and people still measure those. But my point is, like, sales has the same thing. We have these efficiency metrics. Are you being efficient with your time? What's your day look like? But at the end of the day, what you're saying is that you have performance metrics that show, regardless of what the salesperson's doing, is it working? And that's the bottom line, right? So what's happening here? And I think that's what needs to be done, because not everyone sells the same way within, I think, the way that they sell, which it seems like, if you want something to be authentic, they have to do it in a way that, and again, I do think there's basic sales principles. I do think you should have some sort of framework. I'm just saying that if it doesn't feel authentic from the person, sales typically plummets. People get discouraged. They're not efficient, and the the performance is not there. And I don't think everyone's really talking about this, because there's still a lot of script reading. There's still a lot of, it exists. Everyone says it doesn't, but it does when you get on the inside.
Of course it exists. Yeah. And so that goes to your question that you asked before I went on my tangent on performance, was the person bringing their own flavor to the call.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made me think of two things. Whenever I coach or like do a reverse role play, I will be the sales rep and role play with my reps to show them like different angles and ways to handle it and this, that, and the other. Like, can you say that again? And it's like, I can, but I need Nick to be Nick. I don't need Nick to be Derek, right? I need you to like listen and go, okay, I kind of like that. How can I make it natural for it to come out on my end? Because if you try to sound like me, it's not going to work. And if I try to sound like you, it's not going to work. And so I'm always very big. If I'm giving you written word tracks, questions to ask, if we're doing role plays, if I'm giving you suggestions, it's always like, this is a neat angle that you can take that might work. Here's how I would present it, but you need to take it and twist it to be your own, because otherwise it's going to come across weird. And I think we've all had those experiences before where it's felt kind of natural, and then something is said out of left field and you're like, where did that come from? Like, who am I talking to now? Right. And so
Yeah.
you don't want to have that. The second thing it made me think of, and listen, I think he's still probably top dog in the entire sales industry, is Jeremy Minor, right? It's like, he's like one of the top guys, one of the top trainers that are out there.
Derek, are you telling me
But I
that
can tell you
you're
something. Let me tell you this. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt when someone has been in his program.
well,
And
that's
it's
why I just spoke that way.
yeah,
I mean, I
and it's
it's
not and it's not in a way of like, oh, that line of questioning was really good. It's exactly what you just did.
it's
And
the
it's like,
his whole thing is tonality. And it's like
correct.
I mean this with respect as well, by the
Of
way, because
course.
I,
And
I think that he has like really good positioning skills. And I think that if you need to learn sales, like the fundamentals, great program. I've never been through it, but I can just, I know people that have been through it, and
yes.
I think that
Yes.
he does deliver on a lot of things. But it just is very almost patronizing is the tonality that's used in that frame. Which I don't mean that in a negative way, but I actually don't know any other way to describe it. But you knew what I was doing as soon as I used that,
That's
right?
why I
It's
started
like,
laughing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And,
but he
and so
is great.
just
But yeah, it's interesting. So to your
just to
point,
that yeah, it's just to that point of like, you tell me that you've done Jeremy's program. And I think, again, fundamentally speaking, Jeremy has some really outstanding stuff out there when it
oh,
comes
for
to
sure.
discovery
Yeah.
questions and how to present and some of the objection handles and how to use your tonality to your advantage. But the problem is, people try to be Jeremy
Yeah.
after going through Jeremy's program. And it's like, why are you talking like that? When Jeremy does it, it's
Yes.
natural. Like, it comes across
No, when
natural.
he does it, it's good. And
It's
then if
outstanding. It's
I were to do
incredible.
it, you would laugh at me. I would
I
not
just
be good at
I just
that.
laughed at you for doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just to that point, man, is like, I don't care who you're going through. Is like, if you're doing Jeremy stuff, you're doing Cole Gordon stuff, you want to follow Hormozy, whatever it is, like, they all have extremely valuable stuff that you can learn, but you got to make it your own. You just have to. You have to be your own person and know how to deliver it. And are there places for pause and sounding confused sometimes and all of that? Sure, I think there can be, but like, to try to emulate somebody else comes across as so unauthentic.
Oh, dude, this is exactly right. So this is what I call the sea of sameness. If you try to replicate the way that people do everything, the way they sound, the way they talk, the way their content looks, the way you're marketing, I mean, just basically everything, you will be lost in the sea of sameness. The reason that all of these people, the reason that Alex and Layla are where they're at, the reason that Jeremy Minor is where he's at, the reason that Cole Gordon, if you look at Cole and Jeremy when they are pitching, they do not sound even remotely the same.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
And
That's
so it doesn't matter if they're teaching, some of there's similarities in both programs, but the way they sound and they're delivering it is a key reason to believe what we're saying right now, which is that you shouldn't say it exactly the same. Cole is saying it the way that he would say it, and Jeremy's saying it the way that he
absolutely.
would say it. And so it's about
Absolutely.
learning the skill. I do think tonality is important, but if you're being empathetic and you need to lower your voice and calm things down so that everyone can still do that their own way. They could still do it within their own personality. So just do that. You don't need to. There was a book back in the day I read, and I used to think it was the way to go. It's called alter ego. And then there's some elements of it that I think are legitimate. And it's when you go to work, you put on this alter ego and you become someone that you're not essentially, and that helps you perform. I think that's bullshit now, and so there's some sales principles in that book that I like, but I think just being an alter ego, I think being someone that you're not can help you temporarily. But I think that the ultimate fate when you start to follow that path is exhaustion. Because if you've ever tried to be someone you're not, it's really tough to keep up with it. And it
Oh,
becomes not,
absolutely.
it's unfulfilling, it's not fun, and you're not going to perform over the long term because you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. And when you said that, it made me think of some athletes, some professional athletes that are out there that they come across as this, they try to play the villain, if you will, right? And they're like, they try to be this alter ego on the field or on the court. And
Yeah.
then like off court, like when they're off camera, you hear how much of just like a genuine, nice person they are. But when they put that uniform on, they're completely different. And I don't know how they do it. Maybe it gets them and they like playing that role. They like being the Joker instead of Batman. I don't know, but like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
I don't
that'd be
understand it
exhausting.
personally. Something you brought up earlier was your first KPI. I took a note here. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask is around cash collected. I'm really curious on why that's the number one thing that you guys are tracking for the performance metrics. Why is that what you're using, not the entire contract value or the recurring amount or whatever? Why is cash collected the the chosen metric?
Okay. Couple reasons. One, I think your ability to collect cash on the call says a lot about you as a salesperson. Because if I can get someone so bought in that they're like, yeah, this is the best thing ever, and I ask them for 5 grand, they're going to go, yeah, here's 5 grand. They're not going to go, well, can you do two, and then maybe I'll pay you more later. Like a lot of the times, I think that there's money that's being left on the table. So I really like to emphasize we should be collecting more at the point of sale. I think that also has a direct correlation a lot of the times, not every time, on the more that someone is putting in up front, the better the client they actually become. That's not, again, not across the board, but we see it time and time again. Those that negotiate those small incremental installment plans end up becoming just a major pain in the ass. And then people, you go, hey, it's 8K. They go, okay, yeah, great. And they give you 8 grand. They stay to themselves. They do what they need to do, and they end up becoming successful. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot that goes into that. The second reason that I like doing that is that there's really there should be no excuse as to why you're not hitting your cash metric if you're doing everything you're supposed to. Because I'm not saying to collect X amount of cash in inbound sales. So you have a cash goal for the month.
Mm-hmm.
That means the 5,000 leads that are in the CRM, you better be hitting them up. If you're not raking it in on cash collected from appointment setting to your calendar, your pipeline management better be good. Your follow-up game better be good. You better be putting in the extra work to go out and make that happen, because I think that is something that you're in control of. I would rather have someone on my team that has a lower closing percentage but crushes people with cash.
I I like it for a few reasons. I like it for every reason that you just said, but there's another issue that is tied into a lot of comp structures where you might get paid over the course of maybe 90 days when billing hits. I don't think that that's bad either. I think there's a lot of ways that you could design comp structures that are more than fair. But the reason that I like it being upfront with cash is that you don't have control over the fulfillment as a salesperson, right?
Right.
There's a lot of comp structures where the salesperson, okay, first off, sometimes salespeople do set the wrong expectation. I want to just clear the air, and it's
Yes, they
completely
do.
their fault. Okay, so let's just say that now. But there's also people that don't, and they did the job exactly the way that it should. Maybe onboarding was really poor, or they just didn't get the result that they thought they were going to get. Listen, no business is perfect. It's totally cool. But if the salesperson did their job, they should be paid completely, regardless if they canceled halfway through the agreement or whatever. And so, if most of the compensation is based on cash collected, it allows them to be rewarded for the job that was rightfully done and not have to worry about the fulfillment. You may have a new account manager or a new personal trainer, or you may have a new business coach on the team or whatever, and it just wasn't a great experience. It doesn't mean the salesperson shouldn't get their commission. And so,
I
I
agree.
think that approach really mitigates some of that conflict. So I
Yeah.
think that's the first thing that I thought about was fulfillment.
No, that's and such a good point. I mean, I'm sure you've been victim of clawbacks before and things like that too. And
Oh
it,
yeah, dude.
it freaking hurts, man. And it's like I did
Yeah.
everything that you asked me to, and then the fulfillment team dropped the ball, and I get punished. But they don't get hurt. They're still going to get their salary, right? They're still going to get their paycheck. But you're now going to take $500 off my next one because they
You,
didn't do the job. How
you
does
want to
that
know
make it?
some? You want to know the craziest things? And this is a trend. I found this out, and I don't think that there's a team on the planet. If you're a large company, listen. If you're mid market or enterprise level, you should never have this problem. I'm talking your SMB. You're under 20 million. Like you should. I can't see a team not having this problem. But where I'm going with this is that the more sales that I would make in a month anywhere, the larger the month I had, the more problems there were. And it's because of the backlog of intake and fulfillment. So to some degree, I would start to get penalized, not deliberately, because they had too many clients coming in and onboarding would not go well, or somebody would miss an email or something that needed to happen that I had no control over. Right. And what happens is sales then gets basically blamed, right? It's like, oh, well, the salesperson told me this is what was going to happen. This is what was going to happen. This was what, and they go through the roadmap that we would preach, right? And I don't think it was anyone's fault. I think that the problem was that if the salesperson has the biggest month of their life and you have more clients than usual, plus the rest of your team is selling as normal, well, the fulfillment team, your customer service, your coaching, your whatever you're doing, your product delivery, it's all going to have more challenges, right? Because
Yes.
it's more coming in at once. And so I remember my wife would be like, oh man, like this is what you're bringing in this month. This is great. And then I'd be like, yeah, it's like 10% or 20% less than that now because like 5 people canceled because they didn't get a good experience on onboarding and they feel like they made the wrong decision. And you could go review, I would have people review the calls and come back and be like, no, you did everything right. It's on us. Right. And that
And
was
you're the
just a
one that got
result of
penalized.
having, if it was cash collected, I'd be good. Right. But it was not. And so it's just, and I'm not complaining. Right. It's just interesting that sometimes when the salesperson does too good of a job, we have to be prepared somehow on the fulfillment side of things,
Yeah.
which this is something that's really interesting in the revenue architecture model through that book that, by the way, if you're a business owner and you have recurring revenue, please go read that book. It's called Revenue Architecture. I am not affiliated in any way and I'm not an expert in the model. It's detailed and it's still something that I'm trying to implement personally. But I had a thought here and I don't even know where it went, Derek. What were we just talking about?
Cash collected, fulfillment, onboarding.
Yeah, fulfillment. So basically, instead of looking at everything as a funnel, this is what I was saying, where you have like, your marketing, your inquiries, your leads, your BDR, SDR reaching out. They're MQL to SQL, now they're discovery, closing call, closed. Everyone looks at it where the funnel ends, right? But like what they talk about in this model is something called the bow tie model, where sales does not end, right? Because what you have is you've got acquisition as your first stage of growth, retention is your second, which is actually going to be the majority of your growth long term. And then you have expansion, which is when you start to add new products or services. And so the sales model continues to build out, not in a funnel, but a bow tie, right? Not just one way, but two ways. And so
Yeah.
when they're closed, that fulfillment needs to continue to be a part of the sales process. And so I think as sales leaders, part of our responsibility now is to not just figure out how to acquire clients, but we have to be a part of that seamless integration to own. Like right now, where I'm like, oh man, like, I didn't get all of my money when I was in this other role because fulfillment sucked. Well, where did I try to solve that problem with the team? Right. And so I think that we have to be a part of that integration now. We have to be a part of trying to solve this because we have to make sure that that client stays and not just stays for a
Yes.
few months. We want them to be here for however long you want them to be here based on your business model, right? So
You this is what gets missed all the time. Again, they want to focus on other business owners want to focus on acquisition. The most delicate, fragile period of time that you have is after the decision has been made to purchase whatever it is that you're selling and that handoff to that onboarding period
mhm.
to get them ramped up for that product or service. Because you can get 3 grand, 5 grand, 8 grand, 10 grand, 30 grand from somebody. If you fumble through that onboarding, or onboarding doesn't happen, or the person doesn't show up and perform well, and resell the person who just bought as to what they bought, why they bought it, the desires, the outcomes, the timelines, expectations, all that fun stuff. That's where I think a lot of it starts to slip. Is like they get off
It
that
does.
first initial call and they go, "The hell did I just buy?" So you have to have an ace in the hole that handles that. And every time there's an interaction, you are reselling that person as to why they should continue to be there.
It's so crazy. And this goes back to so many things we've already covered. Like if we're talking about some of the retention fulfillment side of things, when you look at post 2 to 3 years in business, if you're over, 5 to 10 million in net new ARR, you'll see that your growth curve is more in line with your retention rate than it is with acquisition. Acquisition will start to flatline the amount of customers that you bring in. This is also why I think that running a lean sales team the way that you're saying is the model, because it allows you to more accurately interpret when to bring somebody on. Because let's just say you have 100 clients that sign up. For simple math, not always a reality. Let's say that 100 people retain the next year. So you have 100% retention, and then you only get 90 clients the next year. Well, now you have 190 clients. So do you understand how retention is the exponent to your growth, not acquisition? You can't retain people you don't acquire. You always have to be focused on acquisition, but your product and your fulfillment needs to be meticulous. And I think salespeople need to be involved, and not just that transition, but strategic touch points to make sure that everything is in line, everything is double checked, and that they're a part of the entire journey as you try to not just keep people, but expand into different products that they may need down the road.
Right. It's absolutely right. I have nothing else to say. Yes. Yes.
So I've got one more thing here, and then maybe we'll wrap up for today. Um, this is just something that's been on my mind a lot, because I always get laughed at by other colleagues that I work with, because when I'm on a sales call, the number one thing that I get told by a prospect is, "You seem really confident." And I believe, okay, that you need to have a delusional amount of confidence. Like that's what I always say, is delusional confidence. Now, I don't mean delusional arrogance. I don't want anyone to just say things that aren't true, to lie about the product, to overinflate growth metrics. I hate when people talk about averages. It's just a personal pet peeve. I'm not saying it's wrong. I do not want anyone to say anything that is not true. But when you're talking about the integrity of your product, you will always have people that are skeptical, right? Like you've been on hundreds of sales calls. No matter the data you give them, have you ever had anyone that's skeptical?
All the time.
Yeah,
They
because
come in with skepticism.
they can't verify the data, even if you were verifying it for them, even if you're showing them things. There's no way for them to actually know. And so if you have a skeptic, showing them more data doesn't help. The
I
only
think it
thing
actually might hurt. It might have an inverse
It
relationship
might
with it.
hurt. I think the only thing that solves that is them seeing the confidence in you. And I wanted to ask you if you see that a lot of businesses that you're working with don't just struggle with getting better at sales or sales enablement or their admin work or their follow up or whatever. Do you see a direct correlation with people that are confident in the process versus the ones that maybe question themselves when they get an objection?
There's a difference of like confidence, overconfidence, and quiet confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think quiet confidence is what wins. So
Mm,
you have those people that come out that act confident, and they almost act like they don't care because they're so confident, they're almost arrogant or cocky. Um,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
that has obviously nobody wants to work with that. You're kind of a douchebag at that point. Nobody wants to work with you, right?
Yeah.
But if you have this quiet confidence about yourself, where you're it seems like you're thinking things through and you're methodical in what you're doing, and your delivery is what is confident, and your biggest thing is that you're taking this confidence and this conviction and instilling it into the person on the other end. That's when things change. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest thing is like, yes, they want to be able to trust you, but they also want to be able to trust themselves that what they're about to buy they can actually do. And so that's how I look at it. Is like you carry yourself with this quiet confidence, how you show up, how you speak. It's okay to pause if you stumble through something. We all do it. Just keep going. Like you don't have to be perfect, right? But being able just to deliver with this certainty and this confidence of like, this will work. Plus, you can actually do this. Because a lot of the times people see success and go, yeah, but they're different. And I think that's the biggest shift is yes, confidence, but confidence in themselves to be able to say yes.
I think that's great. I like quiet confidence too. I've never really heard that so much. I think that that's probably the way to go. Um,
You ever been in a room and a guy walks in and he's not bombastic, he's not loud, he's not a showman, but
mm,
just the way he carries himself, and you're like,
yeah,
that dude's a stud. Like just immediately. That's quiet confidence. Just because the
I
guy
love
walks
it.
in, how he's put together, how he speaks, how he handles the situation, that's the quiet confidence that I'm talking about.
I love that. I am not always that way. I'm like very energetic and loud a lot of times, but I think in a sale, um, I'm not always that loud or energetic. It's just that the confidence when somebody is a skeptic, I've just found it night and day between people that trust you to move forward or don't trust you to move forward. You can sense, and I think the arrogance is just nobody's going to buy from someone that's arrogant, right? So that's why we both kind of said it. I appreciate you hitting on that. Being arrogant doesn't help. Telling someone that they don't love their wife and their kids if they don't move forward or whatever, like all this like weird shit that people do. First off, send me the live calls because I don't believe that you're having success with that. None of that. No one wants to work with people like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I'm my big thing around confidence is when somebody starts to feel skeptical and you cave into their belief system of like, hey, it could happen, but it's likely that it's not. Things like that that seem benign that just reinforce the fact that they're making the right decision by hesitating.
Yes.
I've never done that. I just don't submit to that at all. I just let them know that this is the best possible decision for them and anything that they need from me to help that decision making process, let me know what it is and I'll tell you if I can service it or not. Some requests I can't service because there's no way that I can verify, the data that we're not going to give you access to our HubSpot account or Salesforce account or our, whatever, but some things I can service. So let me know what that may be. And
Yep.
it's so easy to make sure that you're confident around the product. I just think for some reason people cave into whatever the prospect is feeling. And they're using like too much reflective empathy. There's a point where you're too empathetic and you become an enabler, right? And sometimes
That's
enablement
the word that
is
was on the tip of my
disablement.
tongue.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly it. Is that you enable these beliefs that more than likely, probably especially if you're talking B2C, they're more than likely experiencing what they're experiencing and they're looking for a change. So they come to these calls looking to shift, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you just allow them to go back to what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they sold you on the idea that this might not work. And then you're like, yeah, well, maybe it won't. And it's like the biggest thing to me is if it's B2B or B2C, is anytime anyone goes, yeah, but Derek, what if this doesn't work? A lot of people will chase that ball.
Oh yeah.
Well, let me tell you why it's not going to, blah, 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 blah. And like they follow them down that rabbit hole as to why, trying to prove to you why it's not going to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
How it is. I just love, well, what if it doesn't work? Yeah, but Nick, what if it does? And that completely shifts the entire conversation when you frame it like that. Yeah, but what if it does? Well, and then all of a sudden you can start building on that certainty. I think that the way that you deliver that changes everything in that conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's good. And there's so many follow up questions you can ask to start to reinforce that after the fact as well, right? Explain to me, is there a reason? If they say, yeah, if it works, it's great. What are the reasons that you feel like
Mm-hmm.
this wouldn't work? Sometimes people have reasons, but a lot of times they'll just say, I'm not even sure. And it's like, okay, so this just sounds like you're afraid, which is normal, by the way.
We can work with that.
We can work with that. Yeah, means you care, right? And you should care enough to want to solve this problem. So is there anything specifically that we can handle for you that maybe that you're afraid, anything you haven't mentioned? And sometimes people are just afraid to say the real thing and they do have something they bring to the table, or sometimes they just don't and they're afraid to spend money that is going to get wasted, And
Yeah,
so like there's just there's not always a reality to why they aren't making a decision. It's just a reality to them because they're afraid of whatever could happen by not trusting the right people. So I think the best way to overcome that is to stay confident and let them trust your confidence in the process.
that's it. Absolutely.
Anyway, I love the take on. I like quiet confidence. That's probably something I could work on personally a little bit more because I can be very extravagant, loud. Like I talk super fast sometimes, but I love the quiet confidence. I think that's good. Well, anyway, let's wrap this up, Derek. I loved having you on, man. Love to have you on again down the road. You've been a great friend since we've worked together at Gym Launch, and I appreciate staying in touch professionally. And I'm grateful that you're here today. So let's leave the audience with maybe one little tip before you leave, like one piece of advice, and let's wrap it up.
Besides video follow-ups work,
Yeah.
uh, one piece of advice, I guess, in what sense? In a sales sense, in a management sense, in a what are you
Yeah,
looking
let's
for?
keep it sales related.
Okay. I want to go back to the quiet confidence, because I think this is something that we need to stress more of, is that your ability to be able to give that confidence to the other person is incredible. And it is something that will, because you can go through the best presentation in the world, right? You can say everything perfectly, but if it's not instilling the confidence in that person, it's not going to happen. You could have the best frameworks, the best follow-ups, the best everything, but if we're not able to deliver on that level of confidence without coming across as cocky and arrogant, but saying it in a sense of instilling trust, it's something that I think every single salesperson that I've worked with, hired, fired, will hire in the future, that we consistently hit on, is that delivering it with confidence and knowing and giving the prospect this feeling of, I have your back. That's what people want to know. And that's what that quiet confidence instills, is like, yes, the product is great. The features are wonderful. But most importantly, Nick, I have your back and we're going to make this happen. I want you to think like times in your life that someone has done that for you, where it's like you're struggling, you feel stressed out, whatever it is. And someone goes, dude, I got you. I got your back. Let's make this happen. Let's fix this. Let's fix this right now. How much better you felt about the situation and how much more trust you had with that particular person who stepped up to the plate to have your back. So just wanted to expand on that.
Love it. I think that's valuable for everyone listening. Well, I hope everyone learned as much as I had and had as much fun on this show as I had today as well. So without further delay, thanks everyone for tuning in to the first episode with the first, I should say the first guest, not the first episode of the Sales Architecture podcast. And until next time, we'll see everyone soon.